Welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast, the podcast from the home of Scrum. In this podcast, Agile experts, including professional Scrum trainers and other industry thought leaders, share their stories and experiences. We also explore hot topics in our space with thought-provoking, challenging, energetic discussions. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast. I'm your host, Dave West, CEO here at Scrum.org. In today's podcast, we're talking about enterprise agility with Org Topologies. Org Topologies is an approach that helps leaders evaluate and then align their structure so they can stay relevant, deliver the right outcomes, and remain fit for purpose. So over the last few years, I've really paid a lot of attention to Org Topologies, and saw its evolution. And the reason why is because it's a really different approach to enterprise agility. And what I really like about it, and I'm sure there's lots of other things that people like about it, it's quite a broad set of ideas. But the thing that I really like about it is it really helps you make the challenges transparent through this thing called OT mapping. And I really like that because ultimately transparency, I think, is at the heart of many of the challenges that we have. And I really like that. So there's a book just about to, or might be just published. I saw an early copy of it, so I'm in the know. So I thought that would be a great opportunity for you all to hear from the authors of Org Topologies. So I've invited them to the podcast. Welcome to the show, Alexey Krivitsky, Alexey and Roland Flemm. Welcome to the podcast, gentlemen.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thanks.
It's great. Now, all right, we have to start, I'm afraid, at a very simple question, just to sort of kick it all off. Our listeners might not be familiar with Org Topologies. So Roland, you've given me this intro like 20 times because I can be a bit slow. Can you help our listeners understand what Org Topologies is?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Although maybe, one of the simple questions to start with, it's a very vital question, because if we don't know what we're talking about, then this whole podcast really doesn't make sense. So Org Topologies, let's start with the main thing it offers is to give you a language to talk about how your organization is trying to create value. So we're not looking at the organogram that was created. We're really looking at how value is being created, how assignments are being handed off from hand to hand and flows through the organization from concept to cash. And we make that visual. So people can talk about it and disagree or agree on how value is being created, which is a starting point, because that gives you insights on whether you think that is fit for purpose or not. And with that visualization, we offer a method to start working on. We call it MADE. It's map, assess, design, and elevate, as a systemic way to try to improve your organization to make it more fit for purpose. So I think, and in addition to that, like you said, there's a lot of stuff supporting these ideas with principles for design, and a very thick book with all kinds of knowledge that we accumulated over the years.
Okay, we'll talk about the book in a little while, but so the outcome is ultimately you get organizations that are better aligned to purpose and deal with many of the misconceptions inside the organization.
Yeah.
And the word that you used in the book, or it's the title of the book, 10x, which was I thought was a really powerful 10 times, I assume. That's what I read it as. Alexey, talk a little bit about what 10x means.
Yeah, so we know it's a bit of a bold statement to say 10x and to put it in a bold gold at the cover of the book. And we also know, from The Secrets of Consulting, the book from Jerry Weinberg, he said, never promise more than 10% to your customers as a consultant. Otherwise, if you really deliver more, they will be in trouble because, you should not. But here we are with a 10x org book and the method. And we picked that title, and Craig Alarman, our third author, actually influenced and voted for this title because we believe the times are changing and 10%, 20% increase in performance will not actually cut it. And what's really changing, that's AI, right? I mean, we have to mention it quite early in the podcast because AI is changing everything, and because we are working in the field of management, we really need to consider how the landscape is being changed. And one thing to mention is that sooner or later, probably in a couple of years, there'll be a first one person, $1 billion company, because a person with AIs will be able to achieve more than tens and hundreds of people, which will be at 10x or even 100x, a company. And so this is just a matter of time. And imagine you are not a startup, you're not a one-person company, but you are a larger established organization. And now you have to compete with all these small
Yeah.
and nimble AI-augmented companies, which are actually going way faster than they had in the past. So you need to consider like how you can actually reshape yourselves. Because if you have hundreds and thousands of people, like running another change program aiming for 10% increase will not actually make it more competitive.
So let me see if I get this right, Alexey. So what you're saying is ultimately 10x isn't the dream. It's actually, no, we need to do significantly more pro improvement.
Yeah, you can call it a call to action or an aspiration, but also a reality because for some companies, and I'm programming these days with AI myself as much as I can to see how's it going. Actually, I'm amazed every day. So 10x is a call to action for organizations who still not sure that they need to invest in that. But for other orgs, it's already a reality, because people can get so much faster and more efficient. And here comes a twist. I use the word faster and efficient. If you go to, like developers in any large organizations who had been given co-pilots and
Mm,
different Gen AIs, they will tell you they are going faster. They will say, well, this thing actually helped them to maybe implement unit tests in an hour that they never had time before. Like things like this. You hear these stories a lot. But then you go to managers and upper managers and you ask them, do you guys see the performance gain at the global level? And I'm not talking for every company, but for the companies we talk to and for my clients, no, they actually just see that the costs are rising because of all these licenses and stuff you need now to pay, but they don't really see yet or maybe ever the performance gain, and that's because you know local efficiency gain does not directly convert to global gain.
mm. I thought that and I don't want to well actually you've brought up the AI thing so I'm going to lean in so it's interesting you brought up the Mark Andreessen obviously at 16Z or X 16Z he the investor he is now instructing all of his all the companies that come and pitch to him he's basically saying you need to reduce your team to less than 3 people and then I'll invest in you, which is just like, oh my gosh. You can imagine that you're like 3 founders and you're like, oh, can't do that. And I think the point that you're making, Alexey, isn't that, Bank of America is suddenly going to go down to a 3-person company. But what your point is that Bank of America is going to be competing, some of its products are going to be competing with organizations that
Right.
maybe aren't 3 people, but are much smaller. Roland, what do you think on that?
I wanted to chip into this one as well because you were talking about the difference between the small companies, right, that now start up and that can be like very nimble and fast because they don't have this legacy. And then the bigger existing enterprises, they have this legacy. And now, like in the example that Alexey gave, where licenses are being sprinkled like fairy dust in the organization and thou shalt be faster, is not going to work, because it's going to amplify the existing bottlenecks of the
Yeah.
organization even faster. So what we say is, listen, hold on, have a look at your organization. First, think about how your organization creates value, possibly redesign it, fit for purpose, and then add AI, because then you will get the global benefits.
Yeah. It's so funny you say that, Roland, because I was recently with talking to a leader of a large consumer packaged goods organization that's been doing some amazing things with AI. And they have this solution that they're building that they know they can do it, but they can't release it. It's not they know how to solve the problem. They have a particular problem that is cross-discipline, cross-departmental, and that problem AI can solve, but unfortunately the organization can't deploy the solution because of the way in which the organization is structured around, in that case, ownership of value. You know, who says yes, who says no, who maintains the context for this AI, who ensures that it's working effectively, who puts the governance. You know, that no department wants to take on the responsibility, but all departments would benefit massively from the deployment of this technology, and it would cut development of this thing from months, maybe even years, to weeks, because there's this underlying sort of like crisis that they have, and I can't tell you the thing because it's, you know, big NDA signed, but it's just like, oh my gosh, why won't you let your organization free from its constraints? Because hang on, I'm the leader of this department, I'm the leader of this department, I'm the leader of this department, etc., etc. So at the heart, org topologies, the reason why I love org topologies is because of this transparency. I could just imagine in this particular company taking that and deploying it, this transparency, this visualization, and getting everybody, even if you don't solve it, at least they know why they're not solving it, which I think is super, super interesting.
Yeah, so several points to highlight from what you just said, Dave. So this ability or inability of of an organization to do what's right. We did a bit of a study, and we've been working on this topic for almost what, 5 years now,
Yeah.
Roland. We discovered two key what we call mandates that either unleash or hinder intelligence of organizations. And that's why the Org Topologies map has these two axes, right? And one axis is the skills mandate, how many skills people are allowed to apply, to bring to work, and also acquire or recombine. That's one dimension, the skills. And the second dimension is work mandate. How much of a broader picture people see and how directly they contribute not just to outputs, but to the outcomes.
Mm.
And these two dimensions to mandates, they are almost orthogonal because you can have a lot of work mandate but have a very narrow skill mandate. For instance, you are a big manager, so you can change and this strategy, you can reprioritize things, but you don't have the skill to do the work. And that's why you are relying on other people. And these other people can have a lot of skills, so they can be broad on the skills mandate, but can be quite narrow on the work mandate because they are just given maybe tasks because nobody had time to help them see a bigger picture. And these two dimensions create this a variety of different what we call archetypes. You can be almost anywhere on this map as an organizational unit, but depending where you are, you will either be able or not able to do certain work, and you will have some dependencies, right,
Mhm.
to other units, and that eventually creates this network of different org unit spread across the map. And what you just guys said, the power of org topologies as a shared language. Imagine you are able to gather your people and actually visualize that and see all these bad blocking dependencies. And for example, take example of that project, Dave, you just mentioned, where the innovation was there, but because of some bureaucracy was not able to deploy that. You should be able to see that somehow on the map that they were lacking some kind of a mandate. And then you can go and start talking how we're gonna break this up and how we're gonna improve on that.
I think that's incredibly powerful, and I love the way that you both of you emphasize the word shared language or phrase shared language, because I don't feel that we have that shared language in most organizations. We can talk about the work, we can talk about the mission, we can talk about even measures, value. We spent a lot of time with blooming OKRs talking about that, or things like EBM, but we don't have a way of describing the organization, how it maps to the dimensions that you described and to the structure, the topology, as it were. And I think that's incredibly powerful. And 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 I guess that's at the heart of why this approach is so different to things like safe and less. Obviously our listeners are probably very familiar with things like less and safe and other scaling things, the Spotify model, etc. Can you, in a nutshell, describe why this is so different to those approaches and complementary almost? Um,
Yeah, I will just continue on the same line. Yes, actually, there are some local shared languages, like like every framework provides some shared language. Like if you are implementing scaled agile safe, that you are using some shared vocabulary for sure. But and this comes a but, different safe implementations actually might call things the same, but they actually might mean different things. So and like everybody says we have agile teams these days, right? But some agile teams are more agile than the others, and without this level of detail, how will you be able to improve? Right? So we don't actually discard our frameworks. We have our preferences and we like and apply some frameworks with our clients, but we try to build a method that can actually help you map other frameworks and create a broader shared language so that when somebody says we have an agile team, you will say, wait a minute. Let's go to the whiteboard. Let's draw these two axes, two mandates, and really try to understand how much of skills and how much of work this team is allowed to apply. And then we see how to improve it. And then you'll be surprised. Some agile teams might not have all the skills they actually need because of some limitations. And there you go and you start to implement it.
The main difference, I think, Dave, to add to this, is that Org Topologies is really agnostic. It doesn't matter what kind of framework you've implemented, but we try to look at how the value is really being created, as we said before. And then when we see the structure, we can relate to the three main topologies that we see, which is the resource topology, utilization, optimization, or the delivery topology, going for speed of delivery, or the adaptive topology. And when you make whether it's safe or less or whatever you're doing, when you make that mapping, you can assess, okay, which topology am I actually? And with that in mind, referring to the business ambition that you have, the strategy and the market that you're in, you can now you have enough data, enough stuff to decide whether your organization is really fit for purpose. And then you can start tweaking and optimizing to create a structure that will give you the performance or the capabilities that you need for the environment that you're in.
hmm.
Yeah, so I
And
would
it,
say the goal is not just to have a shared language because we have been lacking one. Yes, we have been lacking one, now we have it, but that's not the point. The point is to be able to have a shared understanding and improve on
Exactly.
that. And if like if you go to a typical safe adoption and you ask, what are you guys doing here? How do you see your organization in a couple of years? Not always, but sometimes you got blank stares and people say, we just implement this framework. And it doesn't need to be safe. It can be about any framework, right? We're just doing that by the book. But then the question is, but no, a framework is a vehicle to get you somewhere. But do you know where you're going? And if the speed of that vehicle and the capabilities it brings you, does it allow you to go to that place? So org topologies allow, to take a step back and ask that very difficult but fundamental question, like what do you really need as an organization to drive your strategy? And as Roland mentioned, there are different topologies you can start building, and different frameworks, different approaches will help you to build different topologies. And they're not good or bad topologies, but they might be not fit for purpose, not
Mm.
what your organization need as a vehicle.
Mm. So you've been doing this since 2021, about the last 5-ish years, right? I'd love for you to share with our listeners what you've learned during this journey. I remember when Roland came to me at a face-to-face, PST face-to-face, and he was like super excited about this idea. And I was like, what? What? And then slowly over the next two face-to-faces where I saw him, I think it was Paris actually was the first one we talked about this, right? Which I loved.
Correct.
Not just because we were talking about this, but because we're in Paris as well, which is such a great place to be. But so during these last 5 years, you've really been exploring this with real companies, and I've seen the evolution of the approach and your thoughts, and also the way in which you are describe it, the words you use to describe it evolve over these 5 years. So any sort of standouts in the last 5 years that have made you go, hang on a minute, this is okay. This was a surprise. I didn't think that this would be useful, but it is. Anything that really stands out? I don't know,
Really,
Roland.
and really a nice question, and I didn't prepare this, so this is good. um, you know, I think people lack the patience to stick with one subject for a long time these days.
Hmm.
And just the way you say it, it's like ages already that we're continuously thinking about this same problem and improving our approach to solve these problems that businesses have. Fundamentally, nothing really changed, right? It was already there. We just discovered, but we crystallized. And I think that gave me my epiphany is actually that thinking longer about the same subject made it so rich and so insightful that
Hmm.
it has become super simple for people to adopt. And in the beginning, the way we struggled just communicating, like how does this company work, and the ease that we have now with our, principles and language and visualizations and stuff, I'm surprised, and people just pick up on it real fast, and they do great things with it. So I'm more grateful actually um, that we were able to stick so long with this subject.
I think, Roland, you've just described what we've learned, but you also been humble because there are a lot of things the organizations that we bring this to are learning. I know you have this very interesting and insightful case in 2025 where you entered a company and the company had some issues, problems. That's why they were looking for a consultant, and here you came. But the challenge was that they already thought of knew sort of knew what they were going to do. They already have a target operating model, and they were looking for consultants just to implement it. And there, you put your org topologist hat on, and you taught them to map the current state and see problems in there, and then you ask them to map the state of where the target model would take them, and that would actually show them that that model they chose would not solve the problems they had.
Mhm.
And that triggered a revelation. And reading your case study on that, I was really stunned to learn that you were able to actually help them go back to the drawing boards and pick a new org design that would actually address those issues that they really had. So this is like an example of what we are learning, that even impossible change is actually possible if you approach people with respect. We don't criticize what there is, we map it. We don't criticize the ideas, we map it. And then you help them to look systemically at that and make their own decisions. And when you allow this to happen, magical things, emerge.
I,
Yeah, thanks for highlighting that, Alexey. I also maybe the listeners think, yeah, but my organization is so big, I don't have the mandate, to go in and tell what needs to be changed. And that's not a problem because org topologies can also be applied locally. Although your impact, of course, will be smaller, you can still drive performance in pockets or in cells or in departments of the organization.
yeah, I love the reality is that we often go into and we as consultants do this as well. Not that I do much consulting anymore, but back in the day when I was young, so it's a long time ago. We always go in with a solution in mind, really. Somebody
Mhm.
phones us up, says, "Oh, I got this problem," and you say, "I've got the solution for you." And I love the fact that org topologies makes you step back and go, "Hang on a minute. Let's just spend not a great deal of time, but a relatively small amount of time with the right people and actually get that visualization." That's one of the reasons why I love the OT mapping technique. I think it is quite revolutionary. I'm sure there's other mapping techniques that are also revolutionary, but in our context, I think it is pretty revolutionary. And then everything else falls out from that. The change management practices, the archetypes, etc. I think that's really, really interesting. Okay. Okay, so you've got a book. I do want us to move on because I know we could talk for days and over wine and
Yeah, let's
cheese
go on.
in Paris, it would be a lot more enjoyable. But the you've got a book coming out, right? So
Yay!
tell the listeners about the book and why, because there's a lot of material online. Your website is very rich and it's got some really cool examples and stuff. So here comes the book. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about
Yeah.
10x org, the book.
Yeah, so the book's title is 10x Org, powered by Org Topologies, a manager's guide to elevating business performance with people and AI. So that's really an AI book. We started, as you said, 5 years ago, before this big AI wave. So we didn't see it coming. But now you cannot really talk about, performance and management and org change without mentioning AI. And we are adding AI to the book and to the story. So the book is written as a business novel. There's a story and the theory. And the whole book starts with an HR director, Hannah. Her name is receiving a blunt message from her CEO asking to start replacing people with AI. Of course, a bit of irony and a satire in that, but I think, we know this is going to happen. AI is here to stay. The capabilities are growing with an accelerated speed, and eventually this will happen. And what we did in the book, we applied the org topologies method that had been already developed to try to answer this question: how can we make people not irreplaceable, but rather how can we elevate the intelligence of people within the organizations? And 10% will not be enough. So it should be a 10x and more to elevate people so that they become competitive with AI. And a good news here is that AI is a challenge. It will try to replace us. But if we know how to apply it to elevate us, it can become a great tool.
Mm.
And the book really tells the story of how to rethink your organizational design and then apply AI to actually get to a better place. So the people you have, that asset that you have, ability of people to learn gets amplified with AI.
I think it's good actually. Yeah, I could ramble on again, but
But
no, I
that's
mean it has to be like a real, good addition. If anything, I would say maybe people who read the book will notice that we are biased. We have a preference for adaptive organizations, and that's because in an adaptive organization, as Alexey explained with these mandates, people have broad mandates on skills and work. And if you give those people the ability to really use AI, you can have much more impact of what they can do with that stuff. So although the book, shows you all the topologies, it is drenched, or how do you call this? Simmered. I don't know what the good English word is. It's painted with this color of every organization needs to have some kind of adaptability to survive in the long run.
Yeah. So we were able to formulate 8 principles by writing the book, and the readers will find this principle baked in the story of Hannah and her friends, and also in the theory bits between the chapters. And one of the principle is fit for purpose, right? You really
yeah.
need, as we just discussed before, you really need to build your org so that it serves your strategy. But another principle is that you need to embed multi-learning and amplify it with AI. That's like one of the principle. And here we say that yes, fit for a purpose, it's important and it is contextual, but adaptability and learning are becoming the purpose increasingly with a day by day. As people get challenged by AI replacing them, the only big difference between human brain, human intelligence, you can say, and artificial intelligence is that we people, we can learn. AIs don't actually learn. They just operate with a frozen, information, and they kind of imitate intelligence. You can talk to them as as you know, and they can produce code and whatnot, but it's actually an imitation of intelligence. The real intelligence is a measure at which you can solve novel problems, and we humans are actually built for that. The million years of our human brain evolution have actually brought to that. And so if you really want, so the bottom line of the book, without giving the story, is that if you want to keep your people relevant, and if you want to stay relevant in the business as an organization, you really need to 10x those abilities, those capabilities that people bring to your workspace. And one of them is this ability to learn. And here comes those 2 mandates. The higher you are on those 2 mandates, the bigger is the field where you can learn in these 2 dimensions. And we call it multidimensional learning, or multi-learning as it's known in Scrum.
It is. I spend a lot of time talking to organizations at the moment about how AI is going to fundamentally change the way in which they align to their outcomes, how, what the job titles are, et cetera, et cetera. And I think you said it very nicely in the book about the adaptive organization and their support for learning and their empowerment to make decisions and to build the skills necessary to deliver value. I think is a crucial elements in the future organizations. Though based on experience with the internet, personal computing revolution, it seems organizations have a great capacity to not actually take advantage of this. The difference is, I'm not sure they're going to have the choice, and I think that those smaller organizations are ultimately going to eat them up, just in the same way that Amazon has even though it's a significant size organization, has fundamentally changed the face of retail and distribution. And now in the US, it's going into pharmacies and changing that massively as well. So I thought that was really interesting, from the book, and the principles of Org Topologies, helping people understand that and hopefully release that potential in their organizations. All right, so we're coming to the end of today's podcast. Most of our listeners would love to know what would be the words of wisdom that you would want to leave them with, other than obviously buying the book or gaining access to the book, going to the website, seeing what org topologies are. But what can they take from the last 5 years of learning and this approach that you have developed? What can they take today and use in their situation? I don't know. Roland, do you want to start? Have you got some words of wisdom for our listeners to leave the podcast with?
A couple of years ago, we used to say, let's make thinking sexy again. And I think that still holds. People need to think things through and not just expect that performance emerges magically in an organization. It has to be crafted, it has to be designed.
Yeah, we found this wonderful quote from Deming. There's no instant pudding.
Exactly.
Should we use as an opening a quote in the book? So you cannot, like, you should not expect immediate improvement. You really need to go and study your organization, understand the problems, map, and then you can improve. So this is like one thing you really need to understand before you improve it. But actually, this might sound too heavy for many people, right? And if we're looking for an easier way out here, I guess another line of wisdom from this book would be get the change going. You don't need to understand everything. You don't need to improve everything. You can do better with maybe a couple of teams and experiment a keyword, how to become more adaptive and how to apply AI more strategically, to actually reduce the handoffs and dependencies between the siloed teams. And you don't need to change the whole organization. You can just start with the mandate of change you have. Ideally, not just one team. Because improving the parts will not improve the whole. But if you have mandates for a couple of teams, maybe it's a Spotify tribe, or maybe it's a safe release train, or maybe it's a less product group. You can start there, and most likely you already have enough mandate to experiment with certain things. And this book will give you a lot of ideas and practices. We call them elevating katas. Those simple rituals or techniques you can start experimenting with to get the change going. But still remember, there's no instant pudding. You need to be systemic, and you need to work the change to see the effects.
And I think in the age of AI, everybody's responsible for change management. Everybody needs to be driving how to take advantage of this technology in a different way and thinking about their domain in a very different way. So the great words of wisdom. Thank you, gentlemen, Roland, Alexey. Thank you for coming on today's podcast and talking a little bit about org topologies. I really appreciate you taking the time to share with our listeners about the book, but about the idea of org topologies.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us again. Yeah.
You're very welcome. So, listeners, that was interesting, wasn't it? We talked today about this thing called org topologies, an approach that helps leaders elevate and then align their structures so they can stay relevant and deliver the right outcomes and remain fit for purpose, and how important that is in the age of AI as we're looking to take advantage of this technology in very different ways so we can become, as the book says, even better than a 10x improved organization. And thank you for listening to today's Scrum.org community podcast. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe, share with friends, and of course, come back and listen some more. I'm lucky enough to have a variety of guests talking about everything in the area of professional Scrum, product thinking, and of course, Agile. Thanks, everybody, and Scrum on.